Tripwire is a very well-known brand within the IT security space. We talked prior to coming onto the call about some of the customers you've got. One in particular I think we were talking about was a Fortune 100 customer. Always very nice to have one or two of those in your customer stack. Can you kind of just describe what their pain points were, what they kind of came to you looking for, and how you were able to address those concerns?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got a range of sizes of customers, I guess, that we work with, which include quite a lot of large organisations clearly as well. And one of this particular organisation that we were talking about earlier, they operate in more than 50 countries. So they've got a huge global footprint, and as a result, as you can imagine, the IT processes require quite significant complexity. And in this case, as is often the case, really, with particularly large organisations, they're running into difficulties running their security seamlessly across their global operations. So their challenge was really around manual change control. They had a problem with a network outage, and when they dug into it, it turned out that it was actually due to a rogue configuration script. And that rogue configuration script had basically been moving around from device to device and changing the configuration of each device that it met in its path. So it took them a little while to figure out, what was going on and where it was stemming from, and they identified that the challenge was that they didn't have a way to identify when that sort of change was happening. Ultimately, this actually required quite significant, financial losses for them. And they realised that they really needed to have that detailed change control process in place, and actually the data behind it to understand it, more fully. They realised they needed a professionally managed security configuration management solution. They actually tried doing it themselves in-house, and they just realised that it was a little bit too much of a challenging task. And we've spoken about this, I think, earlier in this conversation around, the resource challenges that a lot of organisations have. Is not to say they couldn't have done it, but they probably could, but they would have had to find a huge amount of resources, and it just wasn't cost effective for them to do it themselves. So they moved to Tripwire ExpertOps because it allows them to quickly identify change through the file integrity monitoring capabilities. And it also enabled them to take a baseline of their known good state and monitor any deviation from that, from that baseline, which was fundamentally what they were looking for. Ultimately they ended up with a professionally, managed change monitoring solution, secure configuration management solution. We've been working with them now on this solution. It was rolled out in 2018. And we sort of rolled that out, covering all of their most critical devices across the network, and then that's sort of grown over time. And now they've got that sort of peace of mind, helping them to avoid, any similar security incidents. They're a very, happy customer.
But they are 50 sites, and not having to manage it themselves would be brilliant. But obviously, as much as we'd like to have our Fortune 100 customers, actually the majority of the space, and certainly the space that we're working is in the SME area. What are the kind of common, use cases that you get to see for perhaps slightly smaller companies that would be potentially relevant to MSPs or VARs?
Very often they don't have those skills in house. Taking even, we've spoken about COVID, we've spoken about the fact that there's been the priority around. You were talking about yourself, but being able to quickly secure an environment. We've got people logging in remotely. As a smaller organisation, you're always having to be reactive to those day-to-day security challenges that are happening, as well as the big ones like when something like the pandemic happens. So in smaller organisations, actually having the skills to be able to provide a sort of a full security configuration management solution or a vulnerability management solution, or even a SIEM, very often. Whilst they may be there, you wouldn't necessarily have the team capable of doing all those things at the same time. So if we look at the range of Tripwire ExpertOps customers, for example, we've got customers who sort of range down to really, relatively small organisations, right through to the larger organisations. And sometimes that's based upon that customer's attitude towards risk. So with financial services, for example, so we go down, really much smaller in terms of the number of seats, because typically their posture on risk is maybe very different from other organisations. But really, we cover the whole gambit from sort of the lower end of medium size right up to a very large enterprise.
Yeah, and I think it's an important point to make. When I think of Tripwire, I think initially it's always about enterprise. It's got that big kind of company kind of feel when you've read it. But actually speaking to you and having a look on the website, things like ExpertOps, actually there is a very nice space that technology fits into for the SME market.
Absolutely, we've spoken with with resellers maybe that perhaps focus more on that sort of medium down to the smaller end part of the market, and in the past maybe Tripwire hasn't necessarily been the obvious fit for them because of where Tripwire is perceived to be in the market. What ExpertOps has allowed us to do is really be able to expand the services and the expertise and the capabilities that we've been offering to larger organisations. We've now been able to expand that and make that available to much smaller organisations too. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very interesting for me as an administrator as well. Just I think after our chat today, I may speak to you about the product itself. So just to kind of finish things off. Sorry. Looking forwards for Tripwire, how does the future look?
It's an exciting time at Tripwire. I mean, Tripwire's been around now for to over 20 years. We have that sort of I guess that brand reputation, and we have our sort of core base of the types of customers that we work with. As we've spoken about with ExpertOps and services, we're seeing a big shift now into new types of organisations who are now taking on Tripwire. And the capabilities around secure configuration management and FIM and SIEM and so on. We're also, increasingly, working around industrial. We're finding in the market that, and this is something everyone's been talking about for a while, and I think it's part of the market that now really is sort of maturing from a security perspective, which is where the industrial market has all been about uptime in the past, and security has potentially been sort of in second place. What we're finding now is as the attack vectors change, as the risks change, that industrial organisations are increasingly now looking for security solutions that they can trust, that they know that isn't going to impact their uptime, but is also going to provide them with the protection that they need.
This is the OT technology.
This is the OT technology, yeah. So Tripwire is actually owned by a company called Belden. Belden are a 100-year-old company, really focused historically primarily on the industrial space. Very, very well known in the industrial space around brands like Hirschman and Tofino, providing robust firewalls and routers in an industrial environment. And they acquired Tripwire because of our ability to be able to do what we do, not just in the IT space, but also within the OT environment as well. So we're seeing a big expansion now in the types of customers that we're working with, really doing that sort of minimal zero touch type security within an OT environment as well. And we're seeing OT actually not just being about necessarily what you would consider to be your typical industrial organisations, but even we're even working with a lot of financial services organisations, protecting things like their air conditioning systems and their security systems and things like that. Things that perhaps
you would normally think about
to be industrial. Or necessarily security vectors, or cybersecurity issues, and we're now protecting them as well. So, big move in that space. Moves into things like DevOps. Lots of changes happening, and whilst maintaining our sort of solid core of what we've done in the past, lots of new avenues. So it's an exciting time for Tripwire.